What's up, everybody? Welcome into Shout, a Buffalo football podcast, day 11 of Bills training camp in the books. He's Ryan Talbot. I am Matt Parrino. And Ryan, I cannot believe we're sitting here August 6th. We're one day away from the end of training camp. Cheap plug, our big event at Dorado on Park Avenue. Wingnutz is coming up, so make sure you get out for that one. Just come hang out with us. It's going to be an awesome party to close down training camp. But I can't believe how fast it's gone.
It flies by every year, Matt. You know, I'll come up for a weekend or two, and then the next thing you know, we're wrapping up at Dorado. Flies by.
It does fly by. And speaking of flying by, if you are going on a vacation, make sure you check out Amtrak's Empire Service. They offer frequent departures daily from Niagara Falls, Buffalo, all the way to New York City. Stops include Rochester, Syracuse, Utica, Schenectady, Albany, Hudson, Poughkeepsie, and many more. There's no middle seats. There's plenty of leg room, and the seats recline. Free Wi-Fi, no baggage fees, and kids ride 50% off. Riding Amtrak is an experience, a fun and relaxing way to get to your destination. All right, Ryan, let's jump into day 11 of Bills training camp. And I want to start with a guy that, there's been so much continuity on the Bills offensive line, right, over the years. And when a guy misses an extended period of time, it kind of sticks out to you, like Ryan Vandermark getting a lot of run, Tylen Grable getting a lot of run in place of Spencer Brown. When he finally does come back, it's like a good reminder, that's what it's supposed to look like. And not to say that Ryan Vandermark and Tylen Grable haven't done a good job. I think both of them had really outstanding training camps. But there's a difference in level of play. And I want to take you into one snap particularly that I want to get into, and it was against Landon Jackson. You have the rookie big defensive end getting his first chance to go up against Spencer Brown. And I mentioned this a couple times, right? Like Landon Jackson is a little bit limited from a pass rush perspective at this point. So going up against Spencer Brown, if you don't win immediately in the rep, he's likely going to shut down everything you try to throw at him. And on this rep in particular, Josh Allen had a lot of time to sit in the pocket, survey the secondary, and Landon Jackson just couldn't make any kind of maneuver to get into the backfield around Spencer Brown. And we talked to him after practice about where he's at, how he's feeling. He said he feels great, so much so that he gave the middle finger to Aaron Cromer, who was trying to take him off the field. The plan was 12 to 15 snaps today, right, for Spencer Brown. He ends up going close to 30 and literally refused coming off because he felt so good. So I think this really quells some of the concern about this back injury. And he came out today, and listen, there were some really good plays. There were some plays where he got beat. I believe it was Joey Bosa who beat him on one. We'll talk about that as well in a minute. He had a little bit of a skirmish just for a moment with TJ Sanders, welcoming the rookie in his first practice. But Spencer Brown back, that is really good news for the Bills.
Huge news for the Bills, and probably shaking off some rust, as you pointed out, with some snaps he'd like to have back, but to almost, they wanted him for 10 to 15 and he ended up doing 30, almost tripling the amount if it was at 15 or if it was at 10, I should say. So that's encouraging. And you mentioned it, Ryan Vandermark, Tylen Grable, both very good. I think both guys could start in certain teams or for certain teams in this league. But last year, Spencer Brown, in my opinion, was an all-pro caliber right tackle. That's how good he was. How elite he was as a pass protector, a run blocker. We see the athleticism, the size, the way that he moves. It's just a little bit different, the way that he moves compared to almost anyone else on that offensive line. He's a much different tackle than Deion Dawkins even. They're both highly exceptional in their own ways, but he brings something different to the party. So having him back out there is huge for Josh Allen in this offense. Knowing that the tweak that he dealt with is somewhat, or seems like it's in the rearview window, that's great news.
He took us into what it's been like since the surgery in 2022 a little bit today too. And, he mentioned this is the latest flare up, and it's obviously very public because he didn't participate in the spring, wasn't available in training camp. But he said that there's been flare ups with the back several times over the course of the last couple of years, but he was able to play through most of it. And when it happened, might have just been at a time when he wasn't needed to play or was, in the offseason or whatever like that, away from the team. the thing about this is, and he also took us into how this actually happened. It was a workout incident where he was trying to kind of get a variation of a squat back into his routine. Maybe went a little bit too hard in the gym, and the process is all about like understanding your body, knowing when to push it, when to back off. Maybe at this point, not going to that very, very big extreme like he did, like you mentioned back in college, right? Like when he was able to probably put up tons of weight and get in the weight room. And I think that becomes part of your process, right? Like when you're in the gym, for me, for instance, as just a very novice lifter, right? Somebody that just does it to stay in shape. If I'm not in the gym, right, I have a different mood, right? So I'm thinking about him as somebody that over the course of his college career, pre-back injury, probably, lived in a gym, and like so much part of like who you are and what you do. It's got to be challenging not to be able to challenge yourself in certain situations. And when you have back surgery, when you're offensive line, when you're that size, you got to be extra careful about every single decision that you make inside the gym.
Yeah, 100%. I have to wear a weight belt every time I lift weights just because I've had so many, pulled muscles in my back. And like you said, we're not NFL linemen, we're not lifting those types of weights. It's just so easy to do. And he's only 27 years old, but 27 years old is a lot different than 17, 18, 19, 20 years old when he was back in college. You're a completely different person from where he is now to when he was back there lifting those really heavy weights. And what he's been doing up until that point, Caitlin, what he's been doing up until that point as a pro is clearly working. I get wanting to try to go heavier. I think he's learned, though, that he might need to leave those really heavy weights in the past.
Everybody's a comedian in the comment section. Mrs. Parrino, you have a different mood when you don't work out. I've never noticed. Ha, ha, ha. I miss you, honey. I'll see you tomorrow. Anyway, quick shout out before we get to some of the other observations. I also wanted to talk about Hard Knocks a little bit. The Bills made a roster move today. We'll get into that as well. So I wasn't at the return of the blue and red, but I obviously saw your picture and your video of Josh Allen running out in the red helmet. And we watched it on Hard Knocks last night. And during that scene, and I think Sean McDermott was even on camera and talked about like, how can you not be romantic about the game, right? Like football and the history behind this Bills team. And it got me thinking, like my entire childhood, as I'm sure yours was wrapped around that helmet, right? Like, the 90s era teams, and there's so much history there. It got me thinking on this day today about my dad who turned 69. And how many Bills games I've watched with him over the years. And it brought a little bit of a tear to my eye. So I want to send a special shout out to Big Al. Hopefully we'll have him on a show coming up over the next couple of months, one of our live events. But it's a really cool day for him. I'm obviously out here in Rochester, but sending love out to my dad.
Yeah, happy birthday to your dad. And yeah, the red helmets are great. That's what we grew up with. Just last night, I was at an event for the Hard Knocks, and Jim Kelly was there signing for hundreds of Bills fans. Thurman Thomas was at the event to watch the episode, which he was featured pretty heavily in. Really cool from a nostalgia factor, even from the media perspective of how we cover the team now, to see those guys there and to see how much fans still are so excited to see legends from their eras in the same buildings that they're at.
So next up on the observations front from today's practice, the Bills made a move this morning, and it's one that we've been talking about that probably should have been made a while ago. Balen Spector, former 7th round draft pick in 2022. When he's been on the field, Ryan, he's been a good player. I think that they've been very intrigued with the potential with this player. And it's why I think he's lasted as long as he has, despite the consistent same lower body injuries, ankle, foot, calf injury. It's like you can play a drinking game around every time there's a lower body injury when it comes to Balen Spector. Well, the Bills released him today. They brought in a new linebacker. I don't have his name off the top of my head. Do you remember the name?
Army too? Yes, I just had it actually. I was just looking at it now. I don't have it in front of me, of course. I'll get it here in a second. But going back to Balen Spector, the only thing I'm frustrated about, Matt, is the fact that he was running with the starters at times in the last week with all the injuries going on, and the fact that They were seemingly giving him more reps with the starters than Joe Andrews. And I get it. You want to make the young guys earn it. You don't want to just hand anything to them. But if you're that close to saying, okay, one more injury and we're moving on, I'm a little baffled in terms of the usage.
It's linebacker Jimmy Charlo came in as an undrafted free agent with the Jets last year, to your point, out of Army. He gets added into the mix. And it's funny because it wasn't even him that had the standout day-to-day with more of an opportunity. It was Keontae Jenkins, this year's UDFA for the Bills. He ends up intercepting Mitch Trubisky on what I would call one of the worst throws of training camp. And again, I don't want to overblow this. And like, of course it's one rep, but it's one of those plays, like a 7 or 8 yard pass. You can obviously see there's coverage in the area. Trubisky throws it off of his back foot. And Jenkins has all the time in the world because of where the platform that Trubisky threw it to adjust to the ball. And he does. He gets in front of it. He picks it off. It's a huge play for a young linebacker. That part of it is great. The more concerning part of it is like continuing to see these kinds of mistakes from Mitch Trubisky, who's fighting for that QB2 job.
Yeah, every day is a battle, and it wasn't the greatest day for Mike White either, based on what you shared with the insiders and our in the insider chat. But to have such a poor throw at this point in your career, too, it's not baffling. It happens, but it's frustrating, I guess, because you wanted one of these guys to really stand out head and shoulders over the other, and I feel like White's had a better camp, but it hasn't been significantly better. It hasn't been, if the Bills are saying it had to be significantly better to keep him ahead of Trubisky. I don't know if he's done that. Mike White throws with more anticipation. I think he's more accurate, but then you have more mobility with Mitch Trubisky, which is similar-ish to Josh Allen. He's not Josh Allen, obviously, from the mobility perspective. He has a bigger arm than Mike White. So you're looking for all these things in terms of who's going to stand out. And in many ways, sometimes they were taking a step back more than standing out and taking a lead in this race.
Yeah, Mike White today had 2 back-to-back throws where he just airmailed it and didn't give his receiver even a chance to make a play on the ball. One of those was a really good rep from Daquan Hardy, who quietly has had there's been moments where you're like, oh man, that didn't look good. But there's been a couple of higher moments as well for him. And this is a guy that I think a lot of fans have forgotten about. The Bills drafted him last year in the 6th round, somebody that they were hoping that would be maybe even potentially their long-term punt returner. They ended up not being super enamored with him. Go out and they bring in Codrington, who I think is definitely going to have a challenge making this roster, by the way. I think there's so many different options when you think about Keon Coleman, KJ Hamler, Laviska Shenault. There's so many different options when it comes to returning kicks. I'm going to be very interested to see what the rotation is, how much they let Codrington go, because they pretty much know what they have in him. I think it's more about, if you need that roster spot, testing out some of these other guys to see if they can do it in a game situation. But I mean, all of training camp observations they're definitely part of the entire evaluation. But what happens in the games when it comes to these backup quarterbacks starting this Saturday, the Bills have not announced yet. Sean McDermott has not announced who's going to play, if Josh will get any time. But I would imagine we're going to see a lot of Mike White and Mitch Trubisky to really start to figure out who's going to inch their way ahead in that race.
Yeah, 100%. If Allen plays against the Giants, it'll be limited. It'll probably be his only preseason action. And then from that point on, it's those two really trying to show their worth, and with a little bit of Shane Buechele sprinkled in at the end, I'm sure. So that's going to be huge. And, I agree with you completely on Codrington. The cornerback, in terms of his actual position, he's so far down that depth chart. How do you justify keeping him only if he's a returner? Now, I will say I think he's going to get a lot of opportunities in the preseason, because Chris Tabor said at training camp, listen, if they don't get jobs here, I want to make sure their tape is good enough to get a job elsewhere. And we know that he put up some pretty good tape as a return man last year. PFWA all rookie team as a return man. The talent's there. It's the problem is with the Bills, as you mentioned, there's only so many roster spots, and they're going to have to be creative potentially early on here. They might not know the week 1 status, for instance, of Khalil Shakir. So maybe this is a year that they keep a 6th wide receiver. And that could play into the role or the decision of keeping Codrington or not. There's so many layers to this, and it's so tough just to justify keeping one player solely for the return man purpose.
So for punt returner, the Bills put out their first unofficial depth chart, and there's been some questions about who's been returning kicks throughout camp, and this is the majority of the folks that have done it. Keon has done some stuff on like the jugs machine. I haven't noticed him a ton. I don't know if you have in any of the days that you've been here actually taking punts during like special teams drills. Have you noticed that at all?
No, just early on in the very early. No, that's it though.
So Codrington is listed as the top kick returner and punt returner. Beyond that, for kick returner, the number 2 guy, Laviska Shenault, then KJ Hamler, and then Darrington Evans. At punt returner, it's Codrington, Hamler, and then Laviska Shenault. So if you're thinking about, all right, Khalil Shakir is not going to be ready, and you're going to keep 5 or 6 wide receivers, maybe a Hamler and Shenault are up against each other for a 5th or 6th spot. Or maybe a Tyrell Shavers makes the kind of push for one of those spots, and then they keep 6 receivers to your point, and one of them is going to end up being the specialist in that case.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be the people figuring out these final roster gymnastics for the team because, Laviska Shenault has some experience as a return man, but we haven't seen a lot of him at training camp because he was out, missed time with injury. We know that KJ Hamler has that ability. He's made a lot of plays as well as a receiver because of all the injuries at that position. But do they feel like they can move him around enough or utilize him on offense enough to justify that? So those are the questions they're going to have to ask themselves. They're going to have to really evaluate everything from top to bottom. Of those names, though, I think Hamler's in a really good spot right now, a sneaky good spot to make this roster if that is part of the equation. Is we also want a return guy, and we want someone that maybe adds a little bit of juice to the wide receiver room.
All right, so let's go to the offensive line quickly here. We talked about Spencer Brown at the top. I think we're going to spend some time on Osiris Torrance, and not his best day today, right? Like there was a few specific times where I felt like Josh Allen faced heavy pressure up the middle. One was a Daquan Jones sack, or should have been called a sack, and they usually let these things play out. I've actually been surprised during this training camp how many times guys get close to the quarterback and they don't blow the play dead. And I think it's because they want to evaluate things at each, part of the play. But I thought Daquan Jones for sure had a sack, beating Torrance with more of a speed move than anything else. Ed Oliver alternately absolutely blasted through Torrance at one point, completely put him off balance, pushed him into the backfield, was immediately in Josh Allen's face, and Allen kind of had to evade and get out of the pocket. It was a really good day for the starting defensive tackles, but one that Osiris Torrance probably wants back.
Yeah, and Torrance has been very good so far in his career with the Bills, but you do wonder a little bit in terms of how much it helps that he's had Spencer Brown next to him at time, throughout most of that time. And I know Brown's back now in the mix, but he's never been graded very well by Pro Football Focus. That's an analytical site. You can have your opinions on that. He's been solid, though. I want to see him elevate from solid, though, to great, because the Bills were very high on him. He was a player that slipped down the draft board. They were able to get him in on day 2 of the draft. He hasn't had a bad start to his career by any means. He's been very, very good and, more of a value pick than anything else to this point. But now this is a year where we're talking about contracts a lot this summer. He's someone that's going to be in line for a new contract soon. And if he really wants to be in the equation for a massive payday, this is the year he needs to take a big leap in his play. He's been solid. He keeps getting a little bit incrementally better. I need to see a big improvement from him this year, though, if you want to start talking about big money for Osiris Torrance.
So if you just see more of the same, are you saying that you might be out on a big time extension?
Yeah. If I see more of the same, yes, it would be hard to justify top guard money. I think he's been good, but I think Aaron Kromer has played a big part in that, coaching him up. The talent around him has played a big part in that. And this is not a knock on Osiris Torrance either, because he himself deserves some of this credit. I can't justify paying a, top interior guard money for a player if I don't see him playing like a top interior guard. I think that guards, I don't want to say are easy to find or easy to replace, but they're a lot easier than a tackle, for instance, and some of these other positions. So I think the Bills could draft. I think they could sign a free agent that they feel they could plug and play if it ever came to that. So, yeah, Brandon Beane's kind of even been on record, not about Osiris Torrance, but about fitting every piece in that they want to be able to fit in. It gets more and more difficult with each passing year with some of these contracts that they give out.
You look at the right guard market right now, and Trey Smith just said it with his new contract with Kansas City at $23.5 million per season. You look up and down, there's only 3 right guards in the NFL. I think there's 2 left guards that are making more than $20 million. Chris Lindstrom with the Falcons, the Panthers, Robert Hunt, which I think is a pretty big overpay, but that's just my opinion. Then you kind of go down the list and you start to find guys like Wyatt Teller making $14.2 million per season. Mekhi Becton, who just came in at 10. I think somewhere in the 10 to 15 million per season based on another season like we've seen for Torrance over the last 2 years. I think that would be something that I'd sign up for just because of the continuity and because of the meat left on the bone. This is somebody that goes back to what Cromer helped scout back when he was at Florida. I mean, he was a true Aaron Cromer guy. And I think David Edwards, he's been so good for the Bills in this short 2-year period, first as the jumbo tight end, and then now in this next year where he started at left guard. There might be some guys on the roster that could compete for that job if Edwards moves on. But in terms of the stability of Torrance at that right guard spot, if you get him at like a Khalil Shakir, Christian Benford type of hometown discount,
yes,
I'd be all in for that. I agree with you though. I don't know if I would at this stage be willing to escalate into the 17, 18, $19 million range for what Torrance has been so far. And I get the stat about I think he's only allowed 1 sack in 2 seasons or whatever it is. I think some of that comes back to the line that he's playing on. I think he's a really, really good player. And I think that at times he has stretches of games where he gives you elite level play. But again, you have to start making some hard decisions.
Right. And Scott, that's what's coming down here in the chat. He's played well most of his career. 1 bad practice is not good enough. We're not trying to knock that. We're talking about, the money factor, the money that top guards get, the fact that the Bills are already up against it cap wise now, and they're still going to add more free agents. They're still going to, in the future, that is, the salary cap will go up, but how much is it going to go up? I'm just saying it's going to be a tough decision if he doesn't take another leap this year in his play in terms of justifying a big contract for him when the time comes.
And it's about the season coming up, not about the practice. We're using the practice today to, transition to talking about maybe a future talking point around Torrance. I mean, he's going to be somebody when it comes. I saw somebody on Twitter just yesterday or 2 days ago talk about was having a back and forth about Torrance, and it was a Bills fan that is very passionate about wanting an extension for Torrance. And there is a group of the fan base that, very, very high on him. I think we're high on him. I think that he has the potential to be a really important piece. He's a great locker room guy. They like him a lot. It just gets to the point where you have to start really making tough decisions. I think Tremaine Edmonds isn't a perfect example because I think it was split. I think a lot of fans were ready to move off of him. Not enough splash plays. It felt like there were big lapses in his consistency as a player. But inside the building, if you could have gotten any kind of hometown discount, I think Bean probably tries to make that deal happen. It was just like at that number, what he was going to get from the Bears, the Bills just couldn't pay that at that time. And I just wonder, as you look towards next season, and the salary cap, it's always going up. That's probably going to be part of the math as well. Can you fit another big time multi-million-dollar, tens of millions per season kind of contract on the books when you're already handing out some of those? And you might have to decide between Torrance and maybe a Connor McGovern, where's the level of importance between those two players and who's more important to Josh Allen in the immediate and then also the next couple of seasons?
And who's waiting in the wings, and who could be the next David Edwards that comes in for pennies on the dollar compared to what a lot of these offensive linemen are getting and coming in and playing at a high level. You and I have talked about Tylen Grable a lot and how great he has been this summer, last year as a rookie. He has the versatility to play or kick inside. He could play guard. He has the ability to play tackle and guard. So who's waiting in the wings? How much money do you have? Can you justify it? What's he looking for? There's so many layers to these conversations.
If you are watching on YouTube right now, we appreciate you. Hit that like button for us. Over 100 watching. Let's get those likes up if you can. Subscribe to the channel. Every time we go live, you will get a notification in your DMs, or not your DMs, in your notification bar on your cell phone, which is great because you can just pop it up, comment, be a part of the show. It is great. We are coming back to Wingnutz. Very exciting. And I say Wingnutz, I mean Dorado on Park Avenue in Rochester, because Wingnutz is coming to Rochester to do a joint venture tomorrow. The wings will be on sale starting at 1 p.m. Ryan and I will be over there a couple hours after that once practice lets out. About 5:30, we'll do the show around 6:30 or 7. We'll bring fans on. We got a couple of fun guests coming out to join in as well. It is going to be an awesome time at Dorado tomorrow.
Yeah, pumped to make, one more trip to Rochester. I'm going to go in studio and do Danger and Battaglia right before, promote it one more time live on the air, head over to Dorado, get a meal, do a podcast, hang out with Bills fans as we wrap up training camp and look ahead to Saturday's preseason game.
Next one here on the observation front, and then just a couple of quick takes on the first episode of Hard Knocks. I'd love to get yours, as we didn't talk about it last night. Dorian Strong with what I would call his best play of training camp. And it was Shane Buechele in at quarterback. So take this with all of that context, right? Shane's had himself a really tough training camp. He puts a ball out, and I think the intended target, I can't remember, it might have been Wilkerson. It was a really slow ball, but one that Dorian Strong had to kind of giddy up a little bit to try to get back into the play and make the play. He does just that. He flies right in front of the wide receiver, picks off the ball. And from a confidence perspective, Ryan, not so much the end result of the play, but getting in the film room, getting that up on the board with, Joe Dana and Jamal Adai and Bobby Babich, and the kind of confidence that kind of sparked for Dorian Strong, who at times I think has struggled a little bit throughout this training camp. He's had some good moments, but he's also had some learning moments, as a lot of rookies will have in their first training camp. No Maxwell Hairston for the foreseeable future. You have Trey White playing pretty well right now in training camp, which gets you excited about what that could be in the season. But beyond that, Benford, who's your obvious number one, and then Tre'Davious White, talk about Dane Jackson, who's a veteran, nice piece there. There's a lot of opportunity here sitting in the face for Dorian Strong.
Yeah, ideally you'll get Max Hairston back near week 1, but week-to-week injuries, you never know for sure. And in a perfect world, you're not going to have to depend on Dorian Strong to play meaningful reps as a rookie. But to your point, right now, we don't know when Harrison's going to be good to go, ramped up and healthy to play. So you're talking about Trey White, Christian Benford, and if one of them were to need to get out of a game or miss a game, you're not going very far before Dorian Strong's name is that next up on the list. They might put Dane Jackson in there for the experience in the reps, but Strong could play a role as a rookie right now, and they need to make sure that they're confident in him knowing the playbook, knowing what he's supposed to be doing. He's definitely gotten better throughout training camp. He made some splash plays early. You see some more consistency here later on in camp. So it's encouraging. I don't want people to sit here and think it's like another Christian Benford situation where they found this stud player on day 3 of the draft. Maybe he develops into that. But right now, definitely a steady upward trajectory for him. I like the way that he's been playing. And if he does have to ever play throughout this season, it would be interesting to see how he fares.
Ryan, just so you know, Sal just would like you to never, ever say anything bad about any of the players. We just got to say all the fluffy stuff, I guess. Sal, I'm just teasing you, buddy. It's okay. We're both very high on Osiris Torrance. Talking about his practice. He had a rough one, right? Talking about some future potential storylines, but I think we could all take it in stride here. All right, next up, I want to go to a couple of quick hitters. I thought Keon Coleman had a really nice day today. He had a touchdown in the red zone period where they were they drove down the field. They did some red zone at the end of that. And then they came back down to the other side and they just ran boom, 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 play after play. Keon had a really great touchdown. Jordan Hancock, I thought, made a really good recognition play. It was just one of those ones where it was such a good route from Coleman. Benford kind of popped out into like kind of some zone coverage, and Josh Allen saw it and fired one in there. Tyrell Shavers had a really good touchdown catch as well. And then Wilkerson, he made another really nice catch as well in the red zone. I thought some really good stuff. And the one guy we haven't talked about, who I'm writing about in my observations, Dalton Kincaid had a great day today, Ryan. Like,
Dalton Kincaid has had such an encouraging camp. If you're a Bills fan, you don't want to keep hearing about how great his camp is. You don't want to jinx anything because he was hyped up a lot last year in the summer as well. But he's been really, really good. The chemistry between Josh Allen and Dalton Kincaid has definitely grown quite a bit. They seem to be on the same page more than not. Keon Coleman's camp has been so encouraging after that first day, especially the way that he's had so many big moments. And there have been some letdowns. There have been some drops and some downplay, but there's been so much more positive for him than negative. That's encouraging. And then, we were just talking about, do they keep 6 wide receivers? Tyrell Shavers has once again made a case for being on this 53-man roster, especially early with all the injuries. I think in a perfect or ideal world, the Bills would keep 5 if everyone was healthy and ready to go week 1. They might have to change that thinking this year. And Shavers is in a really, really good spot.
Kincaid, to me, I've always, since watching his Utah tape, had visions of what he can be in terms of like the crossing pattern and how good Josh Allen leads guys. I mean, even going back to early in Josh Allen's career, I think of like an Isaiah McKenzie, Emmanuel Sanders, a lot of those guys that were really utilized, whether it was like the mesh concept or just getting guys, in the intermediate area running side to side. Kincaid is so good at that, especially against zone defenses, right? Like you're going to see him have some success in those spots. But even against man, like I was listening to Mina Kimes' show and she was talking about the fact that like one of the reasons she's so low on Keon and Dalton is because their numbers against man defense, their catch percentage was under 50%, which is super low and concerning. I don't necessarily think that's as indicative of what Kincaid could be. I think he could be a little bit more of a matchup problem, especially if you now have Josh Palmer in the mix and Elijah Moore, who are both better known for their route running ability to separate. It opens up things for him in that intermediate area, which is where he's got to win. And the one rep specifically today, he just ran away from the defense. I think not Taron Johnson, who else? Cam Lewis was in coverage. He couldn't run with Dalton Kincaid. And I think that a lot of slot corners will have trouble staying with him because of the craftiness that he has as a route runner. I want to see that on display more. He's got to stay healthy. He's got to be on the field. But to me, that's the big key for Dalton Kincaid, is like finding a way to make him more of a target leader in the weapons department for this offense. And today was one of those days where you're like, okay, I see how that could look like once the game starts.
Yeah, and Joe Brady is pretty creative as an offensive coordinator. I think he can create some mismatches for him, put him in really good situations. Mina Kimes' critique is 100%, justifiable. So now it's up to him to, Joe Brady to put him in a good spot. It's up to Dalton Kincaid to stay healthy to show what he can do. The Bills drafted him a few years ago in the first round with high expectations in terms of what he could bring to this offense. This is the year it needs to really come to fruition. In this everyone eats offense, he doesn't need to be some 1,000-yard receiver or someone that gets fed the ball like some of the top tight ends in this league, but he's got to be a consistent contributor, a guy that you want to target almost every game 6 to 8 times. If possible, get him in those winnable situations where he can be a chain mover. He doesn't have to have those huge plays or the explosive plays, but he's also good enough to win in the intermediate part of the field. Put him out there a little bit too. Give him some opportunities, and once he starts making plays downfield, it'll also help him out in the shorter routes as well.
Question about Cole Bishop and Derek Forrest, and It's interesting, Ryan. Like you look at the depth chart for the Bills, and they list Jordan Hancock as the backup to Taron Johnson. And this is unofficial, of course. Like this isn't actually coming from the coaching staff putting this together. It's just based on reps. Today, as has been the case the last couple of days, Jordan Hancock is playing over Derek Forrest. And to Scott's question, I do think it's very concerning and frustrating that we're sitting here a couple of days after the injury to Cole Bishop and he's still not there on the field. Almost more frustrating that he's not even working off to the side. You know, Curtis Samuel, I think they're both dealing with hamstring injuries, if I'm not mistaken. Samuel's still not even working off to the side either. These are guys that it's the same storyline year after year. And I know Cole Bishop is only in his second year, but I had higher expectations for Derek Forrest. He has not been able to crack into the second team or even get a lot of first team reps. And it's been Jordan Hancock who's been getting some of those reps over Forrest here, which I think is good from the perspective that, all right, your young rookies getting opportunities. But I think I'm with John here in that I was expecting a little bit more from Forrest, at least through the training camp period.
I was too. He was an under the radar player that I had high expectations for coming into this summer in terms of opportunities. And, you know, the one thing I'll say about him is he is a little bit behind the eight ball in terms of knowledge of the scheme and defense. When they have been without Cole Bishop or Taylor Rapp, you look at the guys that they've really leaned on, Damar Hamlin, who has years of knowledge in this system. Cam Lewis, years of knowledge in this system. So that certainly factors in and plays a part in it. But now when you throw Jordan Hancock, a rookie, in front of him, that's when you get a little bit concerned because for a player that can wear many hats, in the case of Jordan Hancock, you'd like to see a veteran be able to keep his spot in front of him, at least for now.
Last thing before we get out of here, my big takeaway from the first episode of Hard Knocks, isn't it just so cool to have Trey White back in Buffalo?
Yes.
I think that is, to me, one of the, it warmed my heart when he re-signed because of how things ended, and I know how emotional it was for him and the Bills. He's been such a, people forget because he was going through all the emotional, mental hurdles of, just what it means to go through two significant injuries like he had. The playful nature of the guy early in his career. You think about like the play sheet rolling across the field and him picking it up and acting like he was reading their plays. You think about the Trey White Goalie Academy. And the thing that I took away from this episode is just he seems so at peace with things and energized and like the old Trey. And it's cool to see. And he's having a bunch of fun. And in a lot of ways, it's even more of a cool story because of how much I think the Bills potentially need him to be a vital part of what they're doing, especially early in the season.
Yeah, I said if you were a Bills fan or just a casual NFL fan, I don't know how you could come away from the first episode of Hard Knocks and not root for Trey White to succeed this year. From the entertainment perspective, you got to see a lot of that, but there's the one scene where he makes a play and Brandon Beane is complimenting him about, you look good, and he talks about the hard work that he's put in and how much, that he's doing to try to get back to form, running the hills in full pads after a practice. I think he was on 15 or 16 sprints at that point. He's doing everything possible to try to regain that form. And we've already talked a few times about how much it helped him this offseason not to have to deal with rehabbing in addition to training for another season. And it really has paid off so far.
If you are thinking about taking a trip throughout New York State, skip the 2-hour wait at the airport and head over to Amtrak.com and check out Amtrak's Empire service. Working on the train is also an efficient way to get to your next meeting, or if you work on the train, you don't have to take a day off because you are driving. Learn more about the Empire service and other routes throughout New York at Amtrak.com. And don't forget, the coolest thing ever is that you don't have to arrive 2 hours before departure like you do at the airport. You can get right on any type of train ride, and they have a generous baggage policy as well and an awesome cafe car. Head over to Amtrak.com for more details. The official sponsor of Shout, a Buffalo football podcast. All right, Ryan, we are getting out of here today. We got to go. We're already past the 30-minute mark, almost 40. We'll be back tomorrow. Big show over at Dorado. Make sure you come out. Send us a message. Send us an insider text if you want more details about tomorrow's show. We'll be at Dorado on Park Avenue at 5:30, hanging out, talking Bills, eating wings, having some great drinks. It's going to be a great time. We'll see you then, everybody. Have a great night.